somewhat following on from yesterday, I found myself thinking about vanity a lot. And vanity is something that you are exposed to a lot when you exercise a lot. It's just happens to be a big reason for a lot of people's purpose behind exercising. And I've always found myself to have a very interesting relationship with it. And in the last few years, I found my ideas surrounding it become clearer, I guess would be the best way to explain it. The majority, interestingly, of my philosophy stems from a Bob Marley song in which one of the lyrics is, "Vanity is destruction of the soul." And when I first heard that, it spoke to me. Now, I've been listening to Bob Marley consistently for a few years now. And having grown up in London, even though I'm not Caribbean, my family is African, you find yourself exposed to Caribbean culture, arguably, well, in my case, more than I was exposed to African culture. Outside of my own family, I only spent time in Caribbean households. Growing up, all the closest friends I had, they were all Caribbean. And being a Londoner, it's a dominant part of our culture. It's how the majority of our slang has evolved and developed. So yeah, you feel, especially as somebody who's of mixed race and often gets mistaken for or assumed that I am Jamaican, especially with my hair now. It was a culture that I always felt comfortable in because it was my culture. Like, in many ways, it's not my culture directly, but it was my culture. Anyway, I digress. Vanity is something that, growing up, I had a very easy relationship with. I was blessed. I was always blessed as a child. If I wasn't cute, I was handsome. If I wasn't handsome, I was cute. So I never really had an issue with self-image because all I ever heard was good things. So you could argue, and I would argue, and I would err on the side of caution with anything that I say around vanity, because my experience is somewhat, I don't know, unique. Somewhat unique, and it's somewhat easy for me I feel, to have the philosophy surrounding it that I have because of that. I never yearned to be anything that I wasn't, because I was always allowed to love myself because everyone seemed to love me, so why wouldn't you love yourself? Anyway, that my journey with vanity really, really and truly began when I first decided I was going to dreadlock my hair. And whilst it wasn't a completely conscious decision from the rip, and the decision wasn't made for the purposes of the journey that it ended up taking me on, funnily enough, initially, the decision was made for vanity purposes, ironically. It was a hairstyle I'd always admired. It was a hairstyle I knew I was capable of attaining due to the texture of my hair. And it was something I always felt like I would look good in. And that is partly because, well, in hindsight, not that I necessarily agree with it, but I always never had a problem with experimenting with hairstyles. I had every hairstyle under the sun growing up as a kid, whether it was a Mohican, a high top, skin fade, buzz cut, cane rows, afro, everything. Growing up I've had everything. And luckily, nothing looked too bad anyway. Well, in the moment, I didn't feel like I looked bad, felt like it looked good, and I was always confident. Anyway, and that's besides the point. All that experience allowed me to get to a point in life where I realized that there's so much more as a man. And to be fair, now that I think about it, this is probably what will allow it to resonate and empower anybody who has a very different experience to me. As I got older, I began to realize, as you are becoming a man, and as you become a man, there's very little value in being handsome or cute or good looking or whatever people tell you you are. And there's very little value in that. You have to bring so much more to the table. So it's really quite worthless. It becomes quite obsolete. One of our, like, it's not a value that we can really bring or offer to the world like a woman can with her beauty. So as I began to realize that as I grew older, I wanted to disconnect from it. Initially without realizing, but I realized very quickly, funnily enough. Because very quickly throughout my dreadlock journey, which I might actually be able to dig up some photos, because I used to take photos like once a month, I realized that this process wasn't something that was going to be plain sailing. This process wasn't something that was going to, you can't just go to the fucking barber and catch a trim and walk out feeling like a king when it comes to dreadlocks. You can't do that. You've got to go through shit. You got to trudge through the mud in order to get to the other side. And that was a really important experience for me personally, because it allowed me to really, what's the term, ground myself in the idea that vanity takes away from you in some ways as a man, I believe anyway. Whilst yes, if we are of high value as a male, it is and makes sense to us to, in some capacity, flaunt our value, whether that be wealth or even physicality. However, to be vain doesn't really serve us. Beauty isn't something that we can necessarily directly gain from without having some sort of more substantial value behind it, right? And the periods of my journey in dreadlocks, with dreadlock in my hair, that I experienced where I would look in the mirror and quite simply like just not like what I see from a vanity perspective, I'm talking now. For the first time in my life, I would look at myself and feel like, right, you look like shit, you look homeless, you look like a bum, you look like a caveman, whatever it may be. I relished that experience, I'll be real. And that shit taught me a lot. And it allowed in many ways, which is kind of cliche, but it allowed that the Bob Marley lyric, the idea that vanity is the destruction of the soul, to like really speak to me. And it really opened my eyes as to how powerful disconnecting from something so hedonistic could be. Because I would argue that vanity is quite closely tied with hedonism, but that's a whole different topic. And it just so happened to seep into my psyche surrounding everything. But again, and my close friend pointed this out to me, you look at my training, like I've never trained for aesthetics, and I don't ever really plan to be completely honest. For me, on a personal level, aesthetics is just a byproduct of being a healthy person and being a strong man. So the way I see it is, if I'm healthy and I'm strong, then I'll be aesthetically appealing. However, he made a great point and a great observation. One of the reasons why I personally believe, and it makes sense to me as to why I'm so free from any, what I would consider constraints and desires to be more aesthetically appealing, whether that be looking like being good looking or fucking like improving my body in a specific way. I'm free of that because I grew up with and was raised with a lot of self-love. Like I was never really put in a position where I found it difficult to love myself, and that was a blessing. Like that was a huge blessing. And I feel like that was what allowed me to easily transition to a path that made that value less important to me and essentially stripped it from me. Because I'm now the person who doesn't cut a hair on his head. And I guess you could say that, yes, one thing that makes that easier is having the confidence to know that if I did cut my hair, then without sounding too vain, like, yeah, I'd be a good looking motherfucker. Yeah, it's a strange one. It's a strange one. And it's something that, like, I speak about it now today on this audio in an attempt to, quite frankly, try and empower any young man that had the opposite experience to me. Because as I have already alluded to, I was blessed. I was beyond blessed for the experience that I had growing up from a vanity perspective. However, if you have the opposite experience or a negative experience, an experience that you feel you were a victim of or took away some of your self-esteem or self-confidence, I guess this is kind of my message to say that as somebody who was on the other side, there's way more value in disconnecting from that and it not being of any importance to you in your life, in my opinion. Because as a man, it doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve us. Our beauty isn't something that can really benefit the world. It's not our job to bring beauty to this world, in my opinion. It's not our role to bring beauty to this world. There is a very, very good reason as to why. Okay, I'm generalizing here, but just generally speaking, what is more beautiful to draw or to paint? A woman's body or a man's body? In my experience, the majority of women that I've asked that question have said women's. My mum used to be an artist when she was younger, and I grew up with paintings of women around the house. Why? Because it's just, a man's body doesn't hold beauty like that. It's not a beautiful thing. It's not what, we ain't here to bring that to the world. So don't allow vanity to destroy your soul, would be my message, if anything, because it will do that. And holding on to any ideas of you not looking a specific way or yearning to look a different way isn't gonna serve you. Now, I'm not one of those guys who's here, like, who believes in the idea of fucking, oh yeah, loving yourself whether you're fat or whatnot. Fuck all that. If you're fat, yeah, and you're unhealthy, then you're fat and you're unhealthy. Like, okay, cool. By all means, like, you can love yourself and learn to love yourself. But I believe, again, this channel's all about health. I believe it's so important to be healthy. So I can't sit here and pretend that I, like, have any respect for that ideology. I'm not saying that at all. However, it's very important to differentiate between things that you can control and things you cannot control. You can control how healthy or unhealthy you are as a human being. You cannot control what you were born with. You can't control how big your lips are, how big your dick is, how big your nose is, what color your eyes are, what texture your hair is. You can't control that shit, bro. You can't do it. So why waste energy on that? There's no need. You take the tools you've been given and you make the absolute best out of them. And you focus on the most important thing as a man. Like, what makes us in today's society most dangerous? Our ability to communicate, period. Our ability to communicate is by far our greatest weapon in today's society. And as an extension and as a foundation, our minds. Our minds are I guess you could say, our minds are the whetstone to the sword that is our ability to communicate. That is far more important to us than what we look like. And the most dangerous man in the world is the man who's able to communicate. And now, I'm not condoning what the man did or anything of the sort, or the men did. They're very polarizing figures. I'm not saying that they were good or whatnot. However, you look at somebody like Donald Trump or Hitler, right? Whatever you may think of them, their ability to communicate allowed them to convince millions of people that the way they thought was the right way. Didn't have anything to do with how they look. Both of those motherfuckers are ugly. I'm better looking than both those cunts. I don't know if I can say that shit. Anyway, so this video don't get taken down for that. I'm better looking than both of those motherfuckers. Yet, I ain't as good a communicator. So, I can't do that. Period. Like, that is our greatest weapon. Even as a fighter, I have to accept that one's ability to communicate is far superior to one's ability to fight in today's society. This isn't a society where you have to worry about a male from another tribe coming and trying to kill you and take your shit. You ain't got to worry about that in today's society. Like, the police will handle that. And we've been, dare I say it, in some ways, like, suppressed to take that urge out of us. And it's just not required. You can amass vast resources without having to go and kill someone and take somebody else's. So don't sweat the shit you can't control. There's no point. There's no need. We just got to make the most of what we got and understand that, like, our minds are a tool that is so scalable. There's no cap on the potential of anybody's mind, of any human mind. We're all gods in that capacity. By virtue of our ability to create, we are all gods. And we can do and be, quite literally, whatever we desire if we put our mind to it. And as cliche as that is to say, because I don't know how many people I've heard say it, like, it's something that I do genuinely believe in. We are made up of the same thing as everything. And that is literal. So it's 6 atoms, 6 protons that make us, make everything. Everything that we see. We essentially live in a hologram of perception. And due to that fact, like, we can create a lot more than we think we're capable of. And it saddens me when I see, especially young men in today's society, constantly going up against what we perceive as the world, because the world is now digitalized, thinking that they're not enough and they'll never be able to achieve certain things because they're currently so far behind, whether it be a bodybuilder or a music artist or just, I don't know, a business mogul, a millionaire, whoever it may be. It's very difficult for us to see a way there as young men. But there is, and it takes a lot of focus. It would take a lot of focus. It will take a lot of focus for any of us to get there. And it would be very important along that journey to not sweat the things that we can't control. If it's out of our control, we cannot waste any energy on it. We have to let it be. We have to let it be. Because it doesn't serve us to expend that energy on the thing that we can't control, when there's a lot that we can, that we'd be much better served to spend energy on. This is a much longer one than usual. I don't think I got my point across as well as I would have liked. However, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you made it this far,